Zelensky and Trump face-to-face once again. Intrigue, a game without rules, or hidden support concealed behind the president's smiles. Shock. Putin is already packing his bags while Turkey is preparing fighter jets to escort the dictator. Meanwhile, Europe raises its shield to defend Ukraine while Asia puts a cross on Russia. Watch until the end to find out more about this. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Darina Hutsakalo, and here are the latest events. The third meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump at the White House was neither a diplomatic breakthrough nor a revolution in U.S. support for Ukraine. The negotiations lasted several hours and, according to most media outlets, took place in a candid, at times tense atmosphere. But is the situation really that bad for Ukraine? Donald Trump stated that he hopes to end the war without tomahawks, but the situation is much more complicated than it appears at first glance.
Transferring tomahawks to Ukraine could lead to escalation, but this remains a subject of negotiation.
The president of Ukraine also confirmed that this issue is still under consideration.
We discussed the topic of tomahawks with Trump. This issue has not been removed from the negotiation agenda. We still need to work on this.
After the meeting, the head of the White House called for stopping the war on the front line, and Volodymyr Zelensky supported this position.
I met with President Zelensky. As you know, today we had a very good, very sincere meeting. In my opinion, they need to stop the war immediately. Go along the front line, wherever it may be. Otherwise, everything becomes too complicated. You will never be able to figure this out. Stop at the front line. Both sides need to go home to their families to stop the killing. And everyone, stop right now at the front line. I said this to President Zelensky. I said this to President Putin. Thank you all very much.
We have what we have for our people. And in these circumstances, where we are against such a large country that is against us, I think we need to stop where we are. And he is right, he is correct, the president is right, and we need to stop where we are. It's important to stop where we are and then talk.
According to Donald Trump, the war could end soon if both sides show flexibility. At the same time, after the meeting, Volodymyr Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine needs security guarantees, particularly from the United States. In turn, according to President Zelensky, American energy companies are already ready to provide assistance to Ukraine after Russia's attacks on infrastructure. Next, a direct quote.
During the meeting with U.S. Secretary of Energy Chris Wright, we discussed in detail the energy capabilities and potential projects for partnership in this field. We are grateful for the willingness to provide all the necessary support for the operation of our energy system. For us, it is important to develop cooperation between Ukraine and the United States, particularly to expand the presence of American business in Ukraine.
Also, during a press briefing in Washington, the president of Ukraine was asked whether he calls European leaders for support. After all, according to journalists, Putin may be misleading Trump. Zelensky assured that this support is felt even without additional phone calls.
One way or another, these leaders in Europe are strong supporters of Ukraine. And I have not called European leaders for this support. I know that we have their support. This is the path of our strategic partnership. When we communicate, we have a lot of calls and messages.
Interestingly, European leaders expressed their support for Ukraine following the meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump. Almost all of them posted relevant messages on the social network X.
President Zelensky has the full support of Germany and our European partners on the path to peace. After his meeting with President Trump, we coordinated further steps and will continue to accompany them. Ukraine now needs a clear peace plan. Our shared goal remains a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. Achieving this requires military, financial, and diplomatic support as well as security guarantees. We will continue to work closely with our partners to achieve this goal. At the European Council meeting next week, we will discuss concrete steps to strengthen our support and increase pressure on Russia in order to achieve peace. We firmly support Ukraine. This includes military and financial assistance, security guarantees, a ceasefire, and a peace process. The work continues. No one wants to see this war end more than the Ukrainians themselves.
After Zelensky's meeting with the U.S. president, many concluded that Trump, it seems, is once again trying to sit on two chairs at once. Let me remind you that the day before, Trump announced an agreement to hold a meeting with Putin. The summit could take place within the next 2 weeks in Hungary.
President Putin and I will meet later at an agreed location. in Budapest, Hungary, to try to put an end to this shameful war between Russia and Ukraine.
In turn, the pro-Russian Orban welcomes the meeting between Trump and Putin in his country. The Prime Minister of Hungary has stated that he is ready to host a summit between the leaders of the US and Russia in Budapest.
The planned meeting between the presidents of the US and Russia is great news for peace-loving people all over the world.
Interestingly, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his team were surprised by US President Donald Trump's statement about the agreement. With Vladimir Putin to hold a new meeting in Hungary, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov confirmed that a meeting between Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump could take place within 2 weeks.
It really could happen within 2 weeks or a little later. There is a mutual understanding that nothing should be postponed for too long.
Moreover, the media reported that Putin's plane to Budapest will be escorted by Turkish and Russian fighter jets. The Russian dictator's plane will likely fly over the Caspian Sea, Iran, Turkey, the Mediterranean Sea, Montenegro, Serbia, and Hungary. Along the route, Turkish and Russian Air Force planes will provide security to eliminate threats from drones or missiles. The northern route through Poland and Slovakia is unlikely due to danger and political complications. Meanwhile, as the supporter of the Russian world in Europe, Fico, prepares for the Putin-Trump summit in Hungary, Asia is turning its back on Russia. The dictator's allies are fleeing one after another. The East is halting trade and blocking technology. Putin has found himself in isolation. Asia is closing its doors. Russia's former friends are choosing the West. Why does Asia no longer trust the Kremlin? What is behind this lightning-fast turnaround? Watch all the details right now.
The visit of last hope. That's how global media have dubbed Putin's trip to Tajikistan. After all, former allies, or more accurately, former vassals, are simply turning away from Russia.
Russia, in fact, doesn't even have any real tools to seriously pressure its Central Asian partners, who are supposedly its allies, whether in the CSTO, the Customs Union, the SCO, or elsewhere. There are no signs of compliance there.
In particular, analysts from Bloomberg report that the Kremlin's longtime allies in Central Asia and the Caucasus are establishing ties with China, the European Union, Turkey, and the Gulf countries, seeking to protect themselves from further aggression by Moscow. The reason for all this is the attack on Ukraine. In this way, Putin has essentially declared that he is ready to use force to reclaim any territory that was once under Soviet influence. But such conclusions by Western media are far from unfounded. Among the former allies, Azerbaijan is now clearly leading by example in its dealings with Moscow, refusing to attend Putin's parade, seeking other security guarantors, and most importantly, searching for new markets in international trade. All of this reflects Baku's current stance. Even Putin's admissions on the eve did not help. He claimed that it was his air defense that shot down an Azerbaijani plane over Chechnya at the end of last year. It seems that even such statements can no longer save the relationship.
For the very first time in the entire history of the post-Soviet space, we are truly witnessing a sovereign country that has historically been quite close and intimately connected to Moscow. A country that is quite loyal and steadfast, a nation with a very similar political regime, one that did not take a significantly different path like Ukraine, Georgia, or Saakashvili, is now quite surprisingly acting differently from what was customarily expected and observed. That is, it publicly criticizes Russia, and not only criticizes, but backs up its criticism with corresponding actions, similar to how Russia acts towards the citizens of these and other countries.
Countries of Central Asia are increasingly openly declaring their desire to live independently. For example, just a few days ago, speaking at the UN, the leader of Kyrgyzstan stated that the country will now build its international relations without regard to Moscow.
I can confidently say that today the process of forming a new Central Asia has begun. Thanks to its unity, stability, and growing regional identity, it is taking an increasingly strong position in the system of international relations as an independent actor.
The United States is also adding fuel to the fire of Russian-Asian relations. For example, Donald Trump announced his readiness to pull yet another territory, Uzbekistan, out of Russia's sphere of influence. The head of the White House announced agreements reached between representatives of major U.S. businesses and the authorities of Uzbekistan. The companies will invest $1 billion in geological exploration and the development of critical mineral deposits in Uzbekistan. Trump also announced a major deal between Uzbekistan's Airway and the American corporation Boeing. The agreement, which provides for the delivery of 22 aircraft, is valued at at $8 billion.
There are many areas in which Uzbekistan and the United States can expand mutually beneficial cooperation. I assure you, I personally guarantee the success of American companies operating in Uzbekistan. We will create all the necessary conditions so that American businesses feel confident and can fully take advantage of the opportunities in our market.
A sensational piece of news was also published the day before by Reuters journalists. Turkey will be able to meet its gas needs and is therefore reducing imports from Russia and Iran. Thus, Russia is losing its biggest client, one of the last in Europe. At the same time, Ankara plans to ensure its own supply by increasing production and boosting imports from the United States.
I think they might stretch out this process. They might partially refuse, they might substitute. Of course, Turkey, as always, will act according to its Eastern diplomacy, buying this tail piece by piece or eating the elephant one bite at a time.
China is also eating the elephant piece by piece. For example, China has stopped supplying Russia with high-precision equipment, something that Russian manufacturers are now openly admitting. In particular, the owner of the company Tatpromstan Ildar Nureyev. Meanwhile, the head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, Oleksiy Kovalenko, said that active negotiations are currently underway between Beijing and Washington regarding strategic rapprochement, which could ultimately have catastrophic consequences for Russia.
China is in no particular hurry to supply those very same crucial dual-use products to Russia, which Russia would indeed very much like to acquire and possess, and desperately needs. These items encompass advanced semiconductors, which are essential electronic devices, and various critical components, including intricate parts and sub-assemblies. Also included is heavy-duty engineering machinery, such as construction equipment and industrial tools, along with large, powerful machines specifically designed for self-propulsion, enabling independent movement. Furthermore, there are specialized machines used for the precise processing of ammunition, ensuring its proper preparation, and secure storage facilities for highly volatile gunpowder and other explosive materials, as well as a wide array of other miscellaneous goods and essential supplies, even down to rumors about essential plate carriers for the military. In other words, there are significant shortages everywhere across the board.
Also, China, now acting in its own interest, is putting obstacles in Putin's way on the path to gas alliances between Russia and Central Asia. At the beginning of this year, Gazprom's attempts to build domestic gas networks in these countries have been surprisingly unsuccessful. Analysts explain that this is by no means without
the direct and active involvement, which is crucial for success. Of Beijing, the capital city of the People's Republic of China, a vibrant and historically rich metropolis. Sometimes the roads aren't being built properly, sometimes the guests aren't the right ones, sometimes something else goes wrong, or the political will is slightly adjusted in the Central Asian countries, which have started saying that they themselves can supply oil and gas to China directly, without the mediation or assistance of Russia and without Russian volumes. They don't need this in order to satisfy any of their own shares in the Chinese gas market.
At the same time, an ordinary observer might think that there is no break in relations happening. The leaders of Central Asian countries periodically meet with Putin, and if you listen to Russian propaganda, cooperation is actually only increasing. According to analysts, the main reason for such behavior remains the issue of migrants.
It's a very serious factor that forces Central Asia to take Russia into account and be more conciliatory, even in the current situation. This is because millions of migrant workers are employed in Russia. This seriously helps to resolve social tensions in the region. Because when a generation of millions returns, for example, Uzbekistan has 2 million, Kyrgyzstan 1 million, and so on, if they return to their country and cannot find decent jobs and earnings, it means that social discontent may arise in the country.
However, as soon as new ties with the West strengthen and gain momentum, migrants will begin to return to their homeland. After all, the nature of agreements with Western partners is not about kickbacks and commissions, but about legitimate enrichment at the state level, not for individual officials. And the choice of whether to live in a sanctioned Russia or in their own country with prospects will no longer be an issue.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Moreover, it is unclear how Russia plans to achieve all the stated goals of the so-called special military operation. There is a tank collapse in the swamps. Russia has been left without its armored monsters. 20,000 tanks have been sent for scrap metal. Putin's army is suffocating from losses. The Ukrainian armed forces have nullified the Kremlin's armored power. Russia has completely lost its iron shield. This is a fatal crisis for the Russian army. Tanks are disappearing faster than they can be produced, and the losses are shocking even to their allies. The steel bunker-style empire is collapsing. Next, we discuss the causes and consequences of the tank crisis faced by the occupiers.
Pilots from the 3rd Assault used 2 drones to destroy a Russian tank hidden in a forest plantation. One of the drones flies straight into the barrel. Over the past year, videos of tanks being destroyed have become quite rare, as the Ukrainian armed forces have knocked out a huge amount of the occupiers' equipment. The Russian army is now essentially forced to conduct assaults on foot or using motorcycles.
They are running out of infantry fighting vehicles and tanks, so they have to put infantry on motorcycles and unarmored civilian vehicles.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion, the Ukrainian armed forces have destroyed over 11,000 Russian tanks. This is according to data from the General Staff of the Ukrainian Command. Only a third of the tanks that were there before the invasion of Ukraine remain in the reserves of the armed forces of the Russian Federation.
After 3 years of war, Moscow has depleted its tank reserves to such an extent that, according to reports, they are almost exhausted. Although the Kremlin insists there is no problem replenishing tanks. Notably, in 2022, Russia's tank reserves were stored at 24 bases across the country, and today only 9 such facilities remain operational. Peter Suchiu, military analyst.
Russia has significantly slowed the use of Soviet-era tanks on the front line because the gray zone is filled with Ukrainian drones, for which tanks are easy prey. Data on the loss of most tanks in the war with Ukraine since December 2022 is also confirmed by the American Institute for the Study of War.
Russia still retains 46% of its pre-war stock of tanks, 42% of its pre-war stock of infantry fighting vehicles, and 48% of its pre-war stock of armored personnel carriers. Images of 8 Russian military depots apparently show that Russia has depleted most of its stockpiles, vehicles, and a source on social media estimated that Russia will likely exhaust its remaining stocks of tanks and armored vehicles by the end of 2025. Russia may have a significant number of additional armored vehicles of various types in its arsenal.
Massive, heavily armored battle tanks This refers to storage facilities that are fully enclosed and protected from the elements, ensuring the safety and preservation of stored items.
Most of the tanks have been taken out of storage. These vehicles went from storage to depots and then to the front lines where they were destroyed, captured, or abandoned. The resources and efforts spent on restoring these vehicles did not pay off and did not deliver the desired results on the battlefield. Now, there simply isn't the necessary amount of equipment anymore.
According to the latest open-source intelligence data, there are currently only 2,887 tanks in storage in Russia, and more than half of them are in poor condition. Less than a quarter of them could be classified as fit for use on the battlefield. Fewer than 100 T-80 tanks could be considered relatively modern, while the rest included outdated T-62 and T-64 tanks, and early models of the T-72. Peter Suchiu, military analyst.
The Russian Federation possesses the capability to revive between 1,200 and 1,400 units of its extensive Soviet-era armored vehicles, but it is currently unable to produce any new ones. According to the main Directorate of Development of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the development of new tanks by the Russian Federation amounts to about 180 to 200 units per year, and considering the amount of armored vehicles being destroyed on the line of contact with the Ukrainian Defense Forces, that's just a drop in the ocean.
Taking into account figures from various sources, the question now is not whether decommissioned Russian tanks will appear on the battlefield, but when this might happen and whether it can happen in the necessary quantities.
How do you assess the results of the meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button under the video, and stay up to date with the main news. There are already over 470,000 of us subscribed. More to come. See you soon.